All right, we are live. Welcome back to the third episode of From College to Combine. I'm Mike Sicoli. I'm here with Raleigh Millette. How's it going?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I have just one underscore in my name. I'm just gonna get ahead of that right now. Mike has two, so
Okay, this
we're
is
gonna have a
this is
good
the
day.
wor-
What I'm saying.
this the worst. It is the worst running joke possible.
It's
So I
not.
guess I'll just jump into the reasoning for it. I guess not even reasoning, but you can follow me on Twitter at Michael underscore Sicoli, two underscores. That was too slow. Riley Millette was a little bit quicker here. O'Reilly underscore Millette. Follow both of us on Twitter for some amazing sports takes. Me more so for fancy, Riley more so for general things. Although he has a pretty solid fantasy mind, one may say.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
yeah. But today, for this third episode, we're going to continue where we started last week. Last week, we started talking about the running backs. We went through some honorable mentions and our RB10 through RB6 of the class. Definitely check that out if you missed, because there are going to be names here that we did not talk about. But we're going to dive into the top five, our personal top five rankings, according to consensus between the two of us. But before we do that, the combine technically started on Tuesday. Sure didn't feel like it because of how it starts with interviews. Drills really do start tomorrow's. But, we had a lot of NFL storylines really take a new step forward because of media availability to talk to these execs that haven't been available since, the regular season ended. So, which one do you want to start with? We have a few storyline threads we're just going to start with here for our news for your notes segment. What do you want to start with?
I'd like to address the Saquon Barkley trade rumors that have been kind of floated out there, and I don't see a trade for him happening, and I have kind of phased out all the either off-season pre-draft trade talks or any sort of a lot of reports that have been coming out lately say the Broncos, yeah, we'd love to re-sign Melvin Gordon, and the Bucks saying, yeah, we'd love to re-sign Chris Godwin. Those are the kind of reports that we see all the time every offseason that usually don't end up happening. And you ask a GM whether or not you'd like to re-sign a player you had on your team last year who's now a free agent. 9 times out of 10, you're going to say, yeah, we're looking into re-signing them just because that's what you say as a GM. And I think the same thing kind of goes with Saquon Barkley, as in trade talks don't hold as much weight to me and at this time of the year. Teams haven't made their boards at this point. The combine hasn't even happened yet. So a lot of teams don't know what they're doing with their third round picks. They don't know what they're doing. Giants don't know what they're doing with their offensive line. So I'm holding off on any sort of Saquon reaction.
Yeah, it's the type of thing that I think we'd all like to see. I think as much as the Brian Dable hire might excite us about New York, we'd like to see Saquon Barkley get a fresh start. He does seem a little bit tapped out of there, but I don't think he's on the move. I don't think anyone's sending more than a third. I don't think that's going to be enough for the Giants to move him. It'll be a real smack in the face of that fan base. And that all started with reporters asked Jim Schoen, if I'm getting the name right, the Giants GM, new GM, if anyone is off the blocks, everyone's available for trade. It's a very general statement that I think people might have blown a little bit out of proportion. So the other big talk, just some quick updates, I guess. Calvin Ridley, there's no update there. Falcons confirmed they're going to take it as slow as they need with Calvin Ridley, see what he wants to do. And it's been a very tight camp. Still no news there as much as we may want. Aaron Rodgers out of Green Bay. At the moment, it seems like it will not be. The Green Bay is insisting that the Devontae Adams situation with him being a free agent, possible franchise tag, will not impact the Aaron Rodgers re-sign, of which it's being rumored that he's going to come back on the league new record for a QB type of contract, that $50 million range. If I was a betting man, I'd say they find a way to get it done. Aaron Rodgers will still be a Packer, but it could change any given week based on that man's mood.
Yeah, I mean, I would also bet on him returning to the Packers. That's what I said last year, and I'm maintaining that. And I think the Packers have done all the right things, and it's just so difficult to imagine trading a quarterback who's won back-to-back MVPs. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, it comes down to whether it's if he's going to force his way out, he's going to have a market for him. They still have Jordan Love, but listen, regardless of leaving the playoffs early, Aaron Rodgers gives you the best chance to win. So on the QB front, though, on the other end, talk about a team that was not endorsing their guy. The Colts were not committal on, or completely non-committal on Carson Wentz as their QB going forward. Understandably so, given how fantastically it flopped in the season finale to win and get in against the Jags and get in the playoffs. So Chris Ballard really did just deflect all of it, saying that we don't have a future guy. And Frank Reich was trying to be a little bit more kind. He quite literally said, "I stuck my neck out for Carson Wentz," and it's a lot of feelings that he also said he's gonna be a good starting QB, whether that's here or elsewhere. Carson Wentz is very much on the trade block. Whether someone picks up that contract, it will only happen if the Colts pay some of it. I see him as a realistic landing spot for the Steelers, who actually have some cap space to burn if the Colts choose to take up some of that, maybe about 18 to 20 million of the $27 million cap hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm kind of done with Carson Wentz. I've seen all I need to see to call myself out on him. He's just not good enough. Russell Wilson, the team says, Pete Carroll says they're not going to trade Russell Wilson, not even considering trading him. Same thing with Aaron Rodgers. I don't imagine them trading him either. It's going to take a boatload of picks to get him out of there, and that's another guy where you don't imagine the Seahawks are selling low, I guess you could call it, after an injury kind of derailed this whole season, selling low on a quarterback who's had the success that he has.
Yeah, Russell Wilson will not be leaving Seattle, in my opinion. I do expect Washington to go out and find somebody. Washington being reportedly very aggressively looking for a new signal caller, as Taylor Heineke is not the answer. Ryan Fitzpatrick's a free agent, also did not play a game. So, yeah. And a final side note on Washington, they are meeting with Terry McLaurin on Friday. They're meeting with his agent. I think that's going to be a quick extension. I think that's a lock for extension. It's the easiest deal of the offseason, the easiest decision to make for Washington to re-sign their franchise wide receiver, especially on a down note.
Yeah, agreed. And he's 27 now. He'll be 27 in the beginning.
26 turning 27.
Yeah, that's a good age to cash in on a guy like him.
Yep, on both ends for sure. That's all I have from around the league. But let's quickly, obviously, like I said, the combine did technically start for teams to start interviewing players. So a couple notes there, pretty tight circle so far. It's the type of thing that will leak as the week goes on. More interviews happening. Do you want to talk about Malik Willis? Because this is something you kind of found before.
Yeah. Matt Miller of ESPN and of the Draft Scout tweeted out today that Malik Willis has been impressing in his player interviews, which he did back at the Senior Bowl, and he's continuing to do at the Combine. Teams are saying that they really like his competitive makeup and all the stuff that you want to see out of a quarterback in their interviews. So everything's checking out there. It raises his stock to me a little bit. It's just something to reaffirm, something that we do a lot of commenting on about quarterbacks as we come through the draft season. So it looks promising for him.
And definitely stay tuned for our shows on that next week. Next week, we're going to start up with wide receivers, also go over the combine now that it will be, completely finished up. So wide receivers in the next couple of weeks, we're going to dive into QBs right after that, right around as we have more information as they are, they're cream of the crop, not the class itself, but the premium position. We want as much information to talk about it on. The other note I had out of the combine is that Sam Howell was asked to shoot on a mini hoop for the Eagles, which is, I guess, how the Eagles are evaluating Jalen Hurts, is how many basketball hoops he can make. He shot 2 for 5, and Sam Howell does think he's off the board of the Eagles.
I've been trying for a long time to think about what that does for your prospect. I still have no clue.
I think it always has something to do with whether, like, if you're thrown on the spot, game time decision, all of a sudden this changed, do something out of the norm. What are you going to do here? How are you going to respond to this? How is 2 for off board ? I don't know. We'll talk about it in about 3 weeks, but it is definitely weird questions that we get every year. This is not the weirdest we heard. It will not be the weirdest we hear from this cycle. But one
last piece of news here. One last piece of news.
I'll go for it, please.
We both got haircuts today.
We did. I should have started with that. If you couldn't tell, Riley looks about 14. I look about 16.
My man Rudy set us up. I think that's his name.
our barber.
knows our barber? Please tell us his name because I think
Shout
it's
out
Rudy.
to our barber on Whitney Ave, but his name is not Rudy. I promise
it's
you, it's not
Rudy.
Rudy.
It's
But
Rudy.
this is
It's Rudy,
this
and
is exactly what people tuned in for, is to figure out what his name is. It wasn't Randolph. It might have started with an
It's not
R.
Randolph. It's
not
too long.
Randolph.
It's too long. It's 2 syllables. It starts
Yeah.
with R, but it's not as complicated as Randolph.
Yeah.
I'm willing to
Leave
make a bet on it being Rudy. Honestly, I think it is.
Listen, leave suggestions in the chat, because maybe that's it. If we read it, it'll spark our memory for sure. At least mine. I can't count for Riley.
If you say Rudy, you'll be right.
It's not Rudy.
If you say Rudy, I'm pretty sure you'll be right.
Let's get into the meat of the show. So, second half of last week's show. Last week we talked about RBs 10 through 6. We're going to start with number 5 here. My favorite guy of the class, who I actually have at RB4. Riley, you have him at RB5 or RB6?
Five.
You have him RB5. Tyler Algier out of BYU, the hashtag my guy.
Every time he says his name, he smiles. It's so funny.
I do, because I love Tyler Algier. He's a very talented player out of BYU. Got on the map with his year with Zach Wilson last year. Was fantastic. And then he upped it this past season. He put up almost 1,700 yards on the ground. Not really. He put up 1,600 yards on the ground and an impressive 5.8 yards per carry. He was utilized as a receiver enough. He wasn't overly efficient with it, which I know Riley's going to bring up as a concern. But Tyler Algier is a super talented rusher, and I'm really excited to see somebody with that rushing upside, that vision, the ability to hit the hole with some solid athletic promise that the combine is going to unveil. That type of blend with soft hands, the 28 receptions is not a small number by any means for a 5'11", 220 back. It's analytically, he's sound. He has a great BMI. He has a solid dominator, about 28%, which is around that 65th percentile. And his yards per team play we brought up last week. We like to use that metric. I forgot to change the banner, but we like to use that metric of the yards that he's applying on every play. How much is he contributing? He's contributing one of the highest in this class at 5.94. I'm very excited by Tyler Algier. Tell me why I shouldn't, because you seriously do have to talk me off of bringing him up to number 3.
I mean, I like Tyler Algier too. I will talk you down from him being number 3. He is of these top 5 guys, which I would consider to be a tier above everyone who we've already talked about. He's the least talented in open space. He doesn't have the quick twitch or the ability to make guys miss that some of the elite guys like in this class do, which is why he's beneath them. But he's elite for not elite, but he is everything that you mentioned. He's a solid rusher. He's good between the tackles. I do like his receiving ability. He wasn't, as you said, he wasn't super efficient with it, but that doesn't really concern me. As long as he shows the tools, I'm all right with it, and he did. I'm fine on Tyler Algier as a day 2 pick, as a 3rd round pick. Maybe he ends up in Arizona if they don't re-sign James Conner. Maybe he ends up in Seattle if they don't re-sign Rashad Penny. But I do like Tyler Algier a lot. I'm not as high on him as you are, but I mean you do your thing, bro. But I think he's a really good player.
It's something along the lines of when a top 3 pick, a QB, leaves a program, as well as other people that are just naturally aging out. That program normally goes, especially at BYU, which isn't it's not a Bama, it's not a perennial powerhouse. It's BYU. That team should not be supporting a 1,600-yard rusher with the offensive line play that it had, which was pretty subpar from our film watching of it. It takes a lot for someone to score 23 touchdowns as well as putting up 1,600 yards, and it wasn't all volume. It was pretty efficient of that 5.8 yards per carry, which is he's a workhorse back. That's something that I think a lot of the guys in this class can't say. And while maybe he doesn't have the wiggle, that twitch, I think he's breaking tackles left, right, and center. Like, this is not a comp at all. We don't do player comps, but like Javonte Williams was not twitching. It was not twitchy. No, I'm just saying because I'm relating a last year.
It's just so crazy to hear you say it together.
Because I had to preface it caveat twice. Javonte Williams was not Twitch. That's just it's some players. It's just not their game is Twitch, but they're gonna break any tackle that isn't coming from a Von Miller type of person. And I think that's what Tyler Algier is an excellent tackle breaker who has great size, who is a 3-down type of guy, and who can rip one off as well. He has that home run ability for someone at 5'11", 220. So it's something he offers 3-down potential that I think a lot of guys in this class don't offer.
Yeah, I think you're right about all that. And with that, we'll talk about the next guy who I know we've been pretty split on. This is probably the guy in the top 5 we're most split on, and that's Kyren Williams from Notre Dame, who I have ranked at number 3, and Mike has ranked at number 5. I think Kyren Williams is just one of the most explosive players in this, or running backs in this class. He did benefit from a strong Notre Dame offensive line, but he has the home run speed, and he had tons of chunk plays in the Notre Dame system. He's a great blocker. He's a great pass blocker and pass catcher. He's automatically gonna be a 3rd down back in the NFL. He has the quick twitch ability that I don't think Tyler Algier has as much as Kyren Williams. And just so I can get ahead of you, the big knock against Kyren Williams is his size. He's about 5'9", 200 right now. We'll see about that when he gets officially measured at the combine, which is smaller than you'd like him to see. I would it's a tough ask for a guy to put on 5 to 10 pounds before the start of the NFL season. If he came into training camp 5'9", 205 at the minimum, you would ideally like to see 210, but again, that's asking a lot. That's kind of where you'd like him to be, especially if you're going to ask him to be a 3rd down back and start blocking some edge rushers that are built for the NFL. But I think his talent will keep him on the field. He was so great in between the tackles. He was 61st percentile in Dominator. He had 42 receptions this year, which is the highest in this class. One behind Rashad White, make that so 2nd highest. Rushed for just about 1,000 yards. His yards per carry isn't elite, but that's brought down by Notre Dame playing some stiffer competition than a lot of other teams in college football. So I'm down on Kyren Williams. I'm in on him, even though he's a little bit more undersized. I like my short king, so I'll kind of plant my flag on Kyren.
Yeah, and I'll take that flag off, chuck it somewhere else. But the putting on weight thing, it's an issue for Kyren Williams because I don't think he has the size to be that. Like you said, like what he should be is that 3rd down guy. He should carve that out. And he was probably the best pass protector we saw out of these guys in this class. Can he do that on the next level with bigger guys? That's yet to be seen. There's nothing to indicate that he can't outside of his size concerns. That is a legitimate concern, though. So if that's an issue, that's only part of my problem. Part of the other side is that this Notre Dame line was fantastic, which isn't a knock on Kyren Williams. People that knock people just because they have good offensive line, bad analysis, don't listen to it. But when you combine that with another concern that we wrote down, we watched this together, we wrote down pros, cons. One of those concerns, let me just read it word for word, patience can turn into indecision. That is a horrific combination with a great offensive line. When you have a great offensive line, I shouldn't be seeing indecision anywhere. You could sit there, take your spot, rip it off. But 4.9 yards per carry. Yeah, he ripped off some nice plays, but I think you want to see that number a lot higher given what that line was, what this offense was, we were talking about Notre Dame as we do every year as a playoff contender.
I think you're able to do that more in an offense with a good offensive line. He's in a situation where he's able to sit back and pick his spots. And I think he has the downhill rushing ability to convert that into meaningful production in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think that patience is not something everyone has. It's a good thing to have. But when patience turns into indecision, patience works with good offensive lines. You're entirely right there. But there should never be indecision. Indecision is how Le'Veon Bell, maybe we're talking about landing spot then, where Le'Veon Bell, though that patience turned into indecision when he wasn't behind one of the best offensive line in football. And Le'Veon Bell was one of the best fantasy assets. Completely different build. I think Le'Veon Bell was a much better prospect, but I'm really worried about Kyren Williams' ability to hold up if he actually gets a fantasy workload that we want to see. And then B, I'm just a little bit concerned about his play style when it translates dependent on landing spot. he's the type of guy that could go really all over the place. Where do you expect him to go? I think he'd go in the third, but I could totally see a Kenny Gainwell type of slip to the fourth.
I wouldn't. I would be pretty surprised to see him fall out of day two. I think his talent and his tape and his explosiveness is his ceiling is too high for him to fall out of day two, in my opinion. I think middle of the third round is about where I put him. Pretty much the same tier as Tyler Algier. That seems about right for him.
Yeah, and I the last note on Kyron, so we don't drone on too long. Something you could be a pro, could be a con. I view it as a con. I think NFL scouts will view it as a pro. Plays much bigger than his size. He's a tough runner. He will grit out runs despite being this small guy. He does not play small. That man fears nobody, and I do like that as a person. It's not the combination I want to see with fantasy guys. I want to see people play to their strengths a little bit more than I want to see. He'll be a little bit more elusive than being the power back that he kind of was at times, despite being a smaller guy at Notre Dame.
I think he can be elusive like that, and I trust his ability to still be able to run through those tackles. I think his combination of speed and toughness and finishing will. I think that'll carry over based on what we've seen at the college level and his ability to pick up yards after the carry, and his contact balance and his chunk play ability. Those were all on display in conjunction with his beating cornerbacks and his toughness really. So I would count on that translating.
Yeah, I mean time will tell. I'm not as sold on it. I think these smaller guys that come out face a real uphill battle. And again, if he puts on those 10 pounds, I think he might break those tackles, but I don't think he's going to break them on the next level based on grit. Everyone's got grit on the next level. You're not in the NFL if you don't. But that's my final thought on Kyron. Since he's more of your guy, do you want a final thought on him? I'll give you a final word unless you have
I'm planting my flag on Kyron. He's my guy of this class. Like Algier is your guy of this class, and I will be taking him in at the 109-ish of rookie startups or rookie drafts.
Where do you want to see him go? I'm curious. There's obviously a lot of landing spots, but I feel like Kyron is more. That's also another concern. I view him more landing spot dependent than a lot of guys, which is not what I want to say in the eval process.
I'm going to say Arizona for a lot of these guys under the assumption that they don't re-sign James Conner, which I kind of have a sneaking suspicion every day that they will. But Arizona is a place where he could go where he'll be involved in a passing offense as a passing back, as a third down back with a solid offensive line. That would be a place where he would get production right away. And I think based on what Kyler Murray does, there's been a little bit of discussion about whether or not he's going to be in Arizona long term. I think if he is, then that's kind of the dream landing spot.
I agree. I think it'd be a perfect Chase Edmonds replacement who could walk in free agency and offer that type of pass protection that they desperately need, given how Kyler Murray keeps on getting hit. So, which it's Kyler Murray's fault to a great extent. But that's a conversation for another time. Isaiah Spiller comes in number 3 out of Texas A&M, a guy that really did not impress you, at least on first watch. I was a little bit higher on him than you were, but how do you want us to open up with Isaiah Spiller? I'll give you first crack because I just disparaged Kyron.
Yeah, you did. It took some convincing from me on Isaiah Spiller, and eventually I came around on him. And my issue with him was that his tape didn't pop off the screen. He isn't as explosive as Kyron, in my opinion, or as Kenneth Walker, who we'll talk about later. But Isaiah Spiller comes in with a lot of elite traits that more developed backs in the NFL have. He's got the contact balance and the vision behind the offensive line, the angle ability, and the finishing that Kyron has. Even though it is to Isaiah Spiller's credit that he's a little bigger. Isaiah Spiller's 6'1", 225. That's a very good size. I think he's probably one of the most complete backs in this draft. He's a guy that a team is probably going to take in the second, third round if they're ready to compete and they want a running back who's going to step in on day one. I feel like teams aren't kind of drafting like that anymore because of how saturated the running back market has become in the last few years. But I don't really see him sliding any further than the third round. I'd even be kind of shocked to see him go out of the second based on how he's going to be in the top 3 of this class regardless.
Yeah, like what I really like about Isaiah Spiller is the size. Again, I'm not going to just go size to size because that's not that'll size matters, but
It
uh,
matters.
it does.
Take it from
But
me. I'm 5'5".
yeah, so, but with Isaiah Spiller, I really do like how his patience and vision blends perfectly with a frame that is made for the next level, where he's gonna find the right hole, he's gonna run right through it, and he's gonna pick up that 6 to 8 yards every single time. He's capable of those big plays, 5.9 yards per carry. That's better than guys like Brees Hall. It's better than Kyron Williams. It's better than my guy Algier. It's better than most guys in this class, even, which is not common for a guy that is 6'1", 225. It's now he has his own concerns where 6'1", 225, that's made for 3 downs. It's perfect build almost. Had a lot of drops, not exceptional as a receiver, despite being used in that way. So I think it's something that could be coached up a little bit more. I think I think he'll get there, but it's something you might have wanted to see a little bit more where he had high target share. He was used consistently there, but he did drop a few that you didn't want to see.
Mm-hmm. And the last thing I'll say about Spiller is that he was used in a lot of different ways that other running backs in this class weren't. He was used as a fullback a lot and on the goal line. So he's used with a good amount of versatility, which you like to see from guys, especially in a Texas A&M. So that bodes well for how he's able to fit in a future NFL offense.
Yeah, I really do like his ability to plant and cut. He's great change of direction, which I view as one of the most important traits in a running back when you're doing this evaluation process. And that versatility is good. And I think we've seen over the years that drops in college are just that. They're drops. It's sometimes they translate, sometimes they don't. Most of the time they don't. So
not a very thing that follows you into the NFL. We've seen.
Yeah, we're not overly worried about it. It's something we're going to bring up because if it's the type of thing note now, August comes around, he's dropping a couple passes in preseason, you start to get worried. You see it as a trend, and it might be a reason that he gets suddenly benched in some game. It's a red flag, but nothing you should be, moving him one spot ahead, one spot down. I don't think it's all that much of a chain mover. Yeah. So, number 2. Now, this could go several different ways. I think we all know that there's 2 names left, and I think I speak for both of us when we say that we view both of them very highly. I think I've come around to where your way of thinking. There is a top tier. It is these 2 guys. I used to have Spiller in this tier. I still like Spiller. I do view these 2 guys as primo prospects. Again, still lower than years before, but why not just get into a Brees Hall is number 2. With no disrespect to Brees Hall out of Iowa State. Just one player, man. He's been dominating college for a while. He's only 20 years old, He 17 touchdowns on the ground, 235 carries, over 1,200 yards. Just such a I'd say he's easily the most balanced and complete prospect in this class entirely. Guy that you could, 3 down, put him out there. He's going to rip one off. He's going to get you that first down. He'll do what you need him to do. I'm really a big fan of Brees Hall, and it feels rude to put him at number 2.
I think number 2 is where he belongs. He was used very well as a receiver. He did well as a receiver. His work between the tackles was really good. He has that change of direction that we like to see. I mean, there isn't a whole lot we could say that's bad about Brees Hall, except for the fact that I would put him between Isaiah Spiller and not Kenneth Walker, who will be our number 1 back in this class in terms of explosiveness. I think he has that straight line speed, and he had a good amount of chunk plays, long touchdowns in college. I wouldn't count on him doing it as much as Kenneth Walker just because he doesn't have that juice. But he can do it more than Isaiah Spiller, and he showed his long-term production. He was a Heisman candidate when he was 19 years old. I mean, it goes with the same vein of Jamar Chase, is that guys don't step in and do these kind of things when they're 19 years old as freshmen unless they're top-tier prospects. So that's how I see him.
Yeah, we've been waiting for this, for a couple of years now with Brees Hall, where he's just he is that guy. Like, I'm not worried about Brees Hall translating because he's been so good for so long, and there are some, genuine concerns about, you want to see him maybe bulk up a little bit more. At 6'1", you kind of want to see him maybe close to that 625, but not all too much. It's not a problem. Combining that with his, he went down to some arm tackles that we might have wanted to see him break. It's nitpicky stuff where I think he has the wiggle, he has the power to break those tackles on the next level. A training camp will do him wonders. He's just a very safe product. He's not Dave Montgomery as much as people might be saying just because it's Iowa State. It's a very similar build as well, so it's an easy comp to make. But Brees Hall is his own guy. Like you said, a Heisman candidate at 19 years old. It speaks to him. Good hands. We like Brees Hall a lot. Where would you take him? Let's combine. Let's combine it real quick. Non-super flex. Would you take him in the top 5?
Oh, certainly. I was considering whether I'd take him 3 or 4. I think I would take Traylon Burks and Garrett Wilson over Brees Hall, and I would take Kenneth Walker over Brees Hall. So, yeah, I would say 104. That's where I'd take him.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. A landing spot I know I'd love to see him in. I think Atlanta would be a fantastic spot for him. He's built for that 3-down role. He walks in. I'm not worried about Cordero Patterson, who is also a free agent. So Brees Hall feels like a guy that's going to walk into a 3-down role, and I'm not worried about he feels he's made for a 3-down role. Like he's made to be drafted into a perfect spot. I'm not sure why I feel that way, but he's just that complete of a prospect.
Yeah, totally. And I think that transitions us well into the number 1 guy, who I'm excited to talk about because he's my runner-up guy. He's not my Kyron, but he's my runner-up guy. Kenneth Walker from Michigan State. Let's start with the negatives. I don't know why, but I kind of want to just get those out of the way so then we can talk about and say good things about him.
Okay.
The glaring thing about Kenneth Walker was his lack of production before this year. He was at Wake Forest and he transferred to Michigan State, and then he blew the lid off college football. Not a whole lot of production while he was at Wake Forest. His pass protection isn't perfect. That's a nitpicky thing to say about a running back. It's something you'd want to see more about a guy who you're ranking number 1 in your class. That's going to be something that I'd like to see him improve in. But otherwise, I mean, his tape was just outstanding. I mean, he's got the speed and the power. I was surprised to see how powerful he was, and he's 5'10", 206. He's not as tall or as big as Spiller and Hall, but he plays with the same physicality, and I think he backs it up with his power. I'm not worried about him bulking up like we've said about Kyron or maybe a little bit about Brees. I would be shocked to see him not taken in the top or middle of the second round in the NFL. I think he's just built for the modern NFL. He's explosive. He's what you want out of a running back. He's got he doesn't have the receiving ability. He only had 13 receptions this year, but I think that's a very coachable trait nowadays. You the same way you can coach out drops out of a guy, you can coach receiving ability into a guy, and I think route running in a running back is a lot less of a worry when you have the athletic talent that Kenneth Walker has. So that's really all I'm concerned about. I think he steps in and is a great contributor on day 1.
Yeah, I mean, Kenneth Walker has the best cuts in this class. The man will beat you in space and run right by you. I'm very excited to see what he runs in the 40, which not putting a lot of stock in 40 times, but NFL teams will, and that could be enough to vault him. In that, confirm that second round selection. Maybe a team reaches in the first. I don't think any of these guys are first round guys, but you never know with the NFL. I didn't think Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a first round guy, but the Chiefs did and then didn't use him. So I am very excited about Kenneth Walker for all the reasons you just said. That speed is unreal, and it's a very impressive how his pace, that speed doesn't change when he cuts. It is so fluid of a motion where he's going to cut to the right, he's running at that same speed. And that is difficult for any defender to catch with. And that's what I want to see. That's, the pass pro, the receiving ability. It's not what you want to see out of the guy we're going to call number 1 of the class. We want to see him a little bit more complete. But if he's hitting home runs, he's going to be on the field. He's going to be great for fantasy. And that's what matters. That, everything else can come with time. Could be coached. And if you want to talk about it as well, beyond production, let's put some context to it. His dominated with 63%, which was the 99th percentile of these college products. You can't get you can pretty much not get better than that. So Kenneth Walker is someone I'm really excited about as well. Wake Forest was a completely wish-wash.
I don't put any stock in him not putting up those numbers at Wake Forest. I mean, it's you put a good player in a good team, and he's going to do good things. It's as simple as that. And Wake Forest, I saw some reports that Wake Forest was going through some coaching changes at the time, and they were still trying to find out their identity, and he was kind of stuck in the middle of that. So I'll let that slide. That doesn't bother me whatsoever.
Yep, and 263 carries, it at least aids some of my concern that, if he can hold up to that workload. I'm very excited to see Kenneth Walker. I think he'd be a fantastic fit as a Raheem Mostert replacement in San Francisco. That's perfect to me.
That would be outstanding. And as a guy who reached on Trey Sermon last year because of his landing spot at the 49ers, that would probably make him the 101, would it not?
They would. I think people might have some buyer's remorse, but I think they complement each other well. I still think a receiver deserves and will go number one in this class, but that depends on your league. A lot of leagues like to reach for those running backs in their top one, in their first pick, second pick, third pick, even. I don't think this is the class for that, but we're gonna break down receivers starting next week, which will transition right out of this amazing show. Thank you guys for joining us. And you could always reach out to us with questions about what we think about these RB prospects, how the rankings end up going. Let's just run through it real quick. Number 5 was Tyler Algier. Number 4 was Kyron Williams. Number 3 was Isaiah Spiller. Number 2 was Breece Hall. Number 1, Kenneth Walker. So next week, we're going to jump into the wide receivers of this class, which is honestly much more exciting than the running backs, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a slog going through these backs, I'm not going to lie. But I'm excited to talk about receivers.
Yeah, and the top of the crop of these running backs are fun. Last week's show, very important to know the guys that nobody's talking about. Just not the greatest prospects, but these wide receivers are a lot better. And we're going to go through wide receiver 10 through wide receiver 6 of our rankings next week, as well as we'll have the combine will be done. We'll be breaking down what happened, our takeaways from it. And there's a lot of draft stocks going to be changing over the next week. So definitely stay tuned next week to see what is changing. I meant to click this because that breaks down everything I just said. That is the banner for those listening on the podcast. I know 3 shows in, still making these mistakes. But what mistake I won't make is I won't forget to also throw it to Points in the Paint starting at 7 p.m. Breaking down some fantasy basketball for you guys right here for frequency's sake.
Good catch.
I know, almost let it slip. But this will obviously be, tune in for the podcast version on Apple, Spotify, all the major spots. On YouTube as well, if you want to see our trimmed faces. More so Riley. Riley is beardless, looks like he's 12, but both of us also have fresh haircuts. So definitely worth checking out. At the very least, follow us on Twitter. So me at Michael__Sicoli, 2 underscores. You got Riley here at Riley_Millette. Any final parting thoughts, Riley?
I say it every week, but I'm going to try to come into the show next week with no underscore in my name and see what happens. I'm just going to try it.
I don't think we can allow that. I think I'd probably just
That's too bad. You're not Twitter. You're not Twitter. You can't stop me from taking the underscore out of my name. I'll put my underscore in your name, so now you have 3.
I don't want to give you the satisfaction of laughing at that, so I'm just going to instead say tune in to next week, same time, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. I wrote in the show doc, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Eastern. I'm good at this.
He's not on his game today, you guys.
I'm not, honestly. Either way, I'm trying to say good night. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week. Have a good night.